Okay, today we're going to make an integration for Webflow CMS that will automatically compress your images as soon as you create a new CMS item. And it will be completely free and almost entirely no code. We're going to make this integration using make.com. That is a super powerful tool that allows you to connect things and make automations. And we're going to use the TinyPNG to compress the images. And both of these are services that we can use without a paid account. Okay, let's first look at the Webflow setup. So I've created a collection in the CMS. It's called images, and I just have 3 fields. I have an original image field. I have the compressed image field. That's where we'll put the compressed image. And then I just have a toggle that will turn on after I've done the compression of the image. Okay, but let's jump into Make, which is where we'll create the integration. When you sign up to Make, it looks just like this. And what we want to do is create a new scenario. Scenario is what they call an automation here in Make. The trigger to this scenario that we're creating, we want to be Webflow. So we can search here for Webflow. And we want to create a watch event. That means that it will trigger when something is happening in our Webflow project. The first time doing this, we have to create a webhook and set that integration up. So we can do that. And you create a new connection. And the same here, I'll just call it Webflow v2 connection. After you click create connection, it will open this window and you just have to find the project that you want to give it make access to. Here I'm just going to choose this one and authorize the app. Okay, so now it's authorized and I can set up the webhook. I choose which side it should work on. This side, there's only one. And the trigger type for this I want to be when a collection item is created. And we just save this. Okay, so now we have our first step in the make setup. And if we just want to verify that the connection is working, we can run it once down here. And it will start listening for new collection items being created. If we jump back into Webflow, let's just create a new collection item. Now, when I'm making this collection item, I just uploaded 2 random photos. And I'm doing that just to make sure that we get all of the information into Make when we're going to connect things later on. So this one, it's not going to compress anything yet. Create this item. And if we go back into Make, we can see now that there's a check mark and this little bubble up here. We can click the bubble that will show what happened when it ran the automation. We can see a new item was created in the CMS and it has 2 image fields here and we can see the URLs. Basically that looks pretty good. It worked and it registered that we created a new item. So now we want to add another module so something happens after this item is created. In Make, they have thousands of integrations, but sadly there's nothing for TinyPNG, so we have to do a little bit of work manually. We can use the HTTP app to make a manual API call. Now let's actually jump into TinyPNG so we can get that set up. If you go to tinypng.com, it looks just like this. Yeah, and don't be fooled by the cute panda. This is one of the biggest and most popular image compression APIs. And if you don't have a login already, you can create one here, fill in your info and get your API key. Then you'll get an email with a link that you should click to sign in. Okay, once you click the link, you'll probably see a site like this in your dashboard in TinyPNG, and it may say that you don't have an API key yet. So if you wait just a second and refresh the page, you'll see your API key. And don't worry, I'm disabling mine after this video, so you can't use it sadly. But what you can see here is you get the first 500 compressions per month for free. So that means you can actually do quite a lot of compressions every month without paying anything. If we just head back to the TinyPNG website and click API up here and documentation down there. When we open the development documentation, we can see the instructions on how we set this up. I'm going to run you through the steps that we need to go through. So we want to compress the images, so I go down here, and what we need to pay attention to is the host and the shrink, which is the path. HTTP request is the type post. So let's first put that in. We copy the host name here. So we want to make sure it's HTTPS, and we put in the host, and it was /shrink, and the method was post. Okay, so that was the beginning. Then we also need to verify, so that's why we need to use our API key. So we need to have a header with authorization. So in make, we can add a header and it should be called authorization. And the value of that, let's just head back into the documentation. Okay, the authentication, it has to contain a base64 digest of this string, so API : your API key. Okay, so what that means is that we can't just put our API key from our profile directly in there. We need to put it like this, so it says basic, and then this value here is not the API key, but the base64 version of the API key, of API : the API key actually. So how do we do that? Let's just grab our API key again. And here we wanted to say basic, and then we wanted to say base64, parentheses, closed. And then in here we put API : and then you insert the API key. So that means that it will do the base64 conversion of your API key. Let's scroll a bit further down, and what we want to look at is this one. So we want to upload the image from a URL, and that's the one we want to compress. So to do that, we can copy this format. I'll make sure to put the things in the description as well. So the body type, we want it to be raw, and the content is JSON. And the request, we can insert this example, and of course we don't want to send the happy panda. We want to take in here instead the information from the CMS item, and we want the original image URL. So that's what we put in here instead. So basically we'll be asking them to compress this image instead, and we do want it to parse the response. So we can save this. Okay, let's just do a quick test to see that it's working. Here, let's create a new image. Okay, so here for the second test, I uploaded this photo of these pancakes. Then we can create the item, and we can go back into make. So we see now it registered the new item, and it's making a request to the API. So sometimes this takes a while, but usually it doesn't take too long. Now we can see that it completed the request. In here we can see the response. So the input to the request and the output down here, data output, and we get a path, and that path is for the compressed image. Okay, so that's great, but now we want to put it back into Webflow. So we have the compressed image in our collection. So we add another module in here, and that's another Webflow module. Now we want to update an item. Again, can choose the same account. We may need to verify it again. So we can do that in the pop-up. So now it also allows it to make changes to the CMS data. So that's why we had to verify it again. Okay, so here we can choose to select from a list. We can choose the site. I only have one. We can choose the collection. I only have one. For item, we don't want it to always update the same item. We want it to be dynamic, so it updates the item that was just created. We can do that by mapping. And in here in the item, we can put the item ID. Then it will use the item ID from the first module here. That way it knows which item to update. The name is required, but we can just put the same name. So we take the name here. The original image URL, we don't need to change that, but we do want to change the compressed image URL. In that, we want to take the output from our HTTP request, and we want to take the URL. So that one we'll put in here. And then we have this compressed toggle that I added, and I just want to click yes to that. So it will also be ticked off as true. And then we can save this, and that should actually be our connection. So let's do a test. I'm gonna click run once and to create a new item. Yeah, and for this one, I'm just uploading a almost 4 megabyte YouTube thumbnail from a previous video. Let's see how much it will be compressed. Create, can go back into make to monitor that it's running. So it compressed and it updated the item. Let's go back into Webflow and refresh. Okay, so now we see that the compressed toggle is on and we have two images. So we have the first one that was almost 4 megabytes and the compressed one that is now 800 kilobytes. So that's a pretty good decrease in the file size. If you're happy with the integration now, you can enable it down here, and then it will be running and monitoring for new CMS items. Let's just do another test just to make sure that it's still working now. For this one, I just put a JPEG of myself. And if we go into Make, we'll still actually see that it's doing some things, even though we're not editing it. And it should be done, so we can just check. Okay, so even though this was a JPEG that was already 400 kilobytes, it actually got it down to 187 kilobytes. So still a pretty decent file size saving. So that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this little trick. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.